Metro Vancouver Transit Police and the Police Board respects the Indigenous nations in Metro Vancouver and acknowledges all First Nations and Métis people for their continued resilience, sustainable stewardship, and as active members of the community for generations to come. We recognize that working within and managing the region's transportation system, we do have a role to play in supporting reconciliation with Indigenous people. Welcome, everyone. Final board meeting of 2024. Let's get started. So first item is consent agenda. So does anyone want to out? Wow. Looking at you, George. Okay. Can I get a second? Great. Everyone in favor? Great. All right. Look at that. We're already ahead of time. Wow. Are there any public delegations? Judy, is there any public delegations?
None? No.
Okay. All right. So then we get to talk to Deputy Chief Fincham and Inspector Connor about patrol-based projects.
Morning. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, so Acting Inspector Jeff Connor. So Jeff's leading our operations division, so all of the operational projects happening on the front lines. And Jeff's going to walk us through a few of those projects that have happened under Jeff's leadership.
Great.
Jeff, thank you.
Thank you, sir. My name is Jeff Connor with the Acting Inspector of the Operations Patrol Team. So I just wanted to come in and talk about some of the recent projects that our patrol members have been involved in, hoping to safer spaces on that transit system. So that's going to bring up the top. Get it? So patrol-based projects. So the good thing about these, they're really led by our frontline patrol officers. If they see an emergency issue or something going on in the transit system that they want to address, a priority, then they'll come up with their own short-term patrol-based projects and lead initiative to address those issues. So our projects, they can use So again, the primary reason is to focus police resources and respond to emerging issues. We can use our existing police resources that we have on patrol. If we have sufficient officers to cover off our community service areas and calls for service, we can use additional officers on top of those to focus on these projects. When there aren't those additional resources, we can also use funding from the provincial Safer Communities Action Plan. So there's the site funding initiative that we take advantage of, and also from our transit fleet operating budget to bring in additional resources to deploy these projects. Projects are typically 1 to 4 days in length. Sometimes they're consecutive days, sometimes we spread them over multiple days. So what we do is we look to engage our policing partners from across the region to improve public safety, build relationships through joint agency policing. Projects may involve our jurisdictional police partners, or they may be completed solely by our traffic police members. We also involve community partners by working with businesses, security teams, transit operating companies to create safe transit spaces and improve public perception of safety. We also employ a tiered policing approach to some projects. We also use our community safety officers and sometimes our volunteers from our water. I wanted to put up this map. As everybody here knows, the transit police do cover a vast region throughout the Lower Mainland. So what I've done on here is just mark some areas that our recent patrol-based projects have taken us to. So as you can see, it's very spread out. We do try to reach out to the different communities that we serve. You can also see lots of them are focused along the SkyTrain line. You can see the Canada line, the Mexico line there, where the majority of stars are. We do also reach out through bus initiatives to other areas throughout the LNT. So you can see stars over in Coquitlam and over in Newport as well. Couple numbers, so this area does include 148 kilometers of rail. We have 63 stations that we cover, and 1,800 square kilometers of bus service area. Next slide. All right, so to get into some of the projects that we've done, specifically, and just talk about some of the results that we've achieved. Throughout the summer months, we did use site funding for enhanced visibility patrols, and this encompassed a few different projects. First one being a focus at Davie Street and Denman Street. What we did was we worked with our BPD partners as the beaches closed and people left the beaches. There were issues with people gathering at this bus stop. There was lots of liquor there, disturbances, and we deployed extra officers there in conjunction with Vancouver. One statistic that stood out from this, over the summer months, we did have 120 liquor pullouts, 31 violation tickets issued, and I thought this was significant because it likely prevented lots of this liquor getting back onto the transit system and causing further disturbances on the bus. Our officers also worked with Richmond RCMP. We did a project called the Boost and Bus at the Outlet Mall. This mall, it's on the Canada Line, it's right beside Templeton Station, so it's a little bit difficult to access the mall unless you're going there by transit. So lots of the offenders do use transit to get there, so it's very applicable to what we do. Results from that, we did make 9 arrests in the one-day weekend project. Most of those are going to be for theft. Finally, we did bike patrol. We did 2 bike patrols from New West Station to Commercial Broadway Station. What we do is we patrol the path right underneath the SkyTrain guideway. Those patrols resulted in 3 fare infraction notices, 2 violation tickets, and 11 liquor. And a great initiative. Officers are mobile when they're on bikes, able to respond quick and get to areas, especially when there's traffic. Next slide. Project Sentinel. This one was a site-funded project, so funded through that provincial initiative to target violent and property crime at and around Commercial Broadway Station. Dates were September 27th and October 5th. It was the evening hours between 4 p.m. and 2 a.m. What we did is we deployed 6 officers, both uniform, capacity, and plainclothes, to target violent offenders in the area, any disturbances, and also just to be present and also prevent violence and increase public safety. This project resulted in 11 arrests, 19 violation tickets, 10 fare infraction notices, and 16 liquor patrols. Examples of the arrests: we had arrests for outstanding warrants, weapons possession being a knife, drug possession, breach of court order conditions, and disturbance. Actually, one further thing I'll mention on that, I did mention we work with our business partners sometimes. That breach was actually in conjunction with a no-go to one of the businesses at Commercial Broadway Station. So again, preventing further offenses by somebody who's offended before. Next slide. Project Venture was a cool project. This one kind of actually got started with our communications team here. There was a media outlet that reported person and people loitering at a bus stop in New Westminster. And part of that too was they actually had a photo of a little girl. She was on her bike, and they reported that she was unable to use the bus stop because of people loitering in this bus stop shelter. So we talked about it at work, and we mentioned it to our patrol teams. And again, on their own initiative, they came up with Project Venture to go out and attend a bunch of different bus stops, kind of in our East Division, and just address that. The report was an isolated incident, but the problem of people loitering at the bus stops and making them inaccessible is throughout the whole region. So what we did is on October 15th, 16th, and 17th, officers patrolled bus stops in New Westminster, Surrey, Langley, and Maple Ridge, resulting in 4 arrests for drug possession, 1 arrest on outstanding warrants, for possessions of liquor. And we dealt with a total of 16 subjects, vulnerable people that we did move along from bus stops. But I also like to mention when we do deal with those people that we also try to provide them resources. So instead of just, moving them along without any assistance, we try to provide them warmth in terms of blankets, and then also referrals to shelters in the area, so they're avoiding the bus stops. Next slide. The Transit Security Fair Blitz, this is a one-day project where we work directly with Transit Security. Transit Security has been increasing their fare enforcement. They now have a fare enforcement team, and TransLink is heading a fare evasion reduction strategy. So we're supporting Transit Security as well. So on October 24th, multiple members got together at Surrey Central Station, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. We worked with Transit Security, also our community safety officers, to enforce fares at Surrey Central. That resulted in 173 fare infraction notices issued just in that 2-hour period, so lots of work. And the other good thing about our partnership with Transit Security is we're able to enforce the obstruction of a fare officer, whereas Transit Security is not. So if they're dealing with somebody and they're not able to identify them, if we're directly on site with them, then we can step in and assist them with identification process and investigating that obstruction of the fare officer. Next slide. Bus lane enforcement. So this project is a little bit different because it was led by our targeted mobile enforcement team, which is outside of our patrol teams. But what we did was we did supplement 4 of our enforcement team members. Using that site funding, we had 2 patrol members that joined them for this project. The bus lane enforcement project is kind of an ongoing initiative. It's a major problem that gets communicated to us by Coast Mountain Bus Company. When other cars are using their bus-only lanes, it really does jam up the buses when they're trying to get through certain areas during the community hours. And it makes their route schedules late, and it really inconveniences everybody from the operators to the people using the buses. So these have been really well received. We've had lots of positive feedback on social media, and also from Coast Mountain Bus Company and the operators themselves. They really do appreciate it when we do these initiatives. So the most recent one I wanted to mention was on November 8th. Daytime hours, 0600 to 1800 hours, which it does capture the morning commute and the afternoon commute. We did 4 different locations, Granville Street, Main Street, 41st Avenue, and West Georgia Street. During that one day, we did issue 79 violation tickets, and 73 of those were for violating that bus-only lane. So section 153 of the motor vehicle act. Also wanted to mention that Transit also now has 6 rapid bus services, and the newest one being the R6 route, which goes between Scott Road and Newton. And that route did open up recently, and we actually deployed the bus lane enforcement project when that opened up, just to make sure a new service that was being promoted was able to run during that. Next slide. So just to summarize, so patrol-based projects, we engage in them to address emergency trends on the transit system. They do promote cross-regional policing, engage our community partners, and support a tiered policing approach. Focusing resources on a specific location prevents crime, improves safety with increased officer presence, and dealing with criminal activity and offenders. Finally, projects build relationships within the police and community partners we engage with and the public we serve. That is it. Any questions from anybody for their detail?
Thank you. Yeah. How do you decide which ones to do? If you've got proposals coming in from your patrol officers, how do you decide which projects to embark on?
We do try, well, when an officer comes up with an idea and an initiative, we do try to make everyone happen. So if they do come forward with an initiative, we like to support them. It may not happen right away, but we will generally try to find a time when it's ready. We do review the project plans, make sure they fit with our mandate and what we want to be accomplishing.
Right.
We may tailor them a bit. So I would say, yeah, it's just based on resources and a time frame of when we can make it happen.
Right.
But generally, all of them.
Okay, so how many are you doing, like, say, in a year?
Over a year, I would say we probably do at least one a month. So I'd say between
Yeah.
10 and 15 projects a year based on the patrol.
Right? Okay, interesting.
And just to add, I think what Jeff was saying too, like when they do come forward with a potential project, like they do engage with the crime intelligence unit, just to kind of pull
Okay.
the intelligence surrounding that particular hub station or particular area of the transit system. So
Right.
we've done a number of projects at Metro Town, you know, from the media standpoint, we always reach out to the intelligence unit for us, just the data kind of supporting that project, because
Right.
they're also looking at that at the outset, but we also want that from a communication standpoint as well.
Okay, great. George, did you have a question?
A question and just two, sorry, a comment, I guess, and two questions. One is thanks, Jeff, for this. I think the provincial election, it just showed that the whole issue of public safety was at the top of the list in terms of the returns that came back, what people were concerned about and so on. So I think it's really important that you're doing, because most people are always saying that they want stopping of the crime before it actually happens, rather than just responding afterwards. And so the visible deterrence, and I know we're, to steal the tagline from Children's Hospital, we're small but mighty. It's really important for us to be able to do that. So I think that's very positive. I'm glad to see a good presentation on some of the things being done. A week from today, I know we go from the change with the RCMP formally to Surrey. And just a question around patrol and so on, how does that affect us? The relationships that have been built, obviously, over the years with the RCMP, and now you have a whole new group. How is that going to affect our working relationship? Will it? What's being done to make sure that nothing falls between the cracks, or that we aren't part of that solution that we're talking about?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll start and then Jeff can jump in as well. So I think a lot of the work that Jeff's team's been doing and we've been doing across the organization is partnering with Surrey Police Service and the RCMP currently. And through that model, that's been a long-term adjustment period. So a lot of the projects that we've been doing within that jurisdiction will transfer over, whether it's RCMP or Surrey Police Service. We'll continue to partner with both agencies. And as Surrey Police Service, with their plan, expands into Surrey in different areas, we will continue to partner with them as that growth or that change happens in Surrey. I think we're looking forward to growing strong relationships with Surrey Police Service, as we did with the RCMP, as we do with our other policing partners in the other municipalities. And that's been a priority with all of Jeff's projects, is to reach out to those partners, do an intelligence-led approach, and then work with those agencies. So Metro Town with Burnaby, for example, it was important for us to work with Richmond RCMP with their project, work with Vancouver on projects and planning in Vancouver, and just making sure that we're capitalizing on that force multiplier, because we can't do it alone. We are small, we don't have a lot of people. That's why we're creative by using CSOs, transit security, and our TransLink partners as well.
I think a good example with Surrey Police, we're already working collaboratively, and given that transit is a unique policing environment, and actually bringing them, onto the system, sharing our knowledge, and that will support sort of that joint work together.
So a follow-up, and this is really a question maybe Stephen can answer, but through Marty as chair as well, and for the whole board. This kind of stuff is great, I think, just for us to be aware, because sometimes we get caught up in other things and don't know what actually is happening. And we don't know, and the majority of people don't know. And back to this whole branding issue of what is a transit police, how do we as an organization explain our role and so on. So just wondering if on a quarterly basis, if we had this kind of information and other things that's produced, like really an amalgam of things that are done, is there a mechanism, or is it worth considering, and I'm asking Marty as chair, for us to be able to put something together that basically a short report using existing materials on a quarterly basis that gets sent to mayors and councils that we are part of in our 22 different communities, First Nations, councils. Also, probably to the MLAs and MPs that are also here, just to provide them the basic information. Whether they go and read it all or not, it just seems like we're missing an opportunity to actually talk about the success that we're having. Because I don't think they're always going to get it. They're not going to get it from their CAOs or through Metro Vancouver's activities. Is that something that's worth considering? Are we doing that now? Question.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of mechanisms in which we do communicate that information. I think what we really need to do is capitalize on TransLink's government affairs team more to get that information we are generating out to a broader distribution list. So we do the quarterly TransLink board reports where we do highlight those kind of key initiatives and files. We try to highlight one or two kind of major initiatives a month in media. Most recently, we had the operation by our crime suppression team where we had the fentanyl in the shape of dog treats being sold, not exclusively around the transit system, but the transit system was some of the distribution locations, which is how we became engaged. So we try to highlight some of those kind of key projects on a monthly basis. And we put that into our strat plan reports. When you look at that report every 6 months, the kind of blue boxes throughout highlight those kind of key projects throughout.
Right.
But I think to your point, because we serve 23 different communities and there's so many opportunities to get in front of city councils and MLAs, it's just really trying to identify with the transit government affairs team, what's the best mechanism,
Right.
and with what regularity to get out in front of those relevant parties and share the information with them. The chief goes out a couple times a year, most recently with the City of Surrey City Council, and presents very similarly this information specific to their municipality. Every time our chiefs have done this in the past, the feedback has been extremely positive. City councils want to get those kind of presentations on an ongoing basis. I seem to recall it was Coquitlam was asking, could we get this report on a quarterly basis? But
Right.
we only have one chief and there's 23 different communities. So
Right.
it takes a fair amount of time to, tee those up. But I think it's worth an ongoing conversation about how we can get information in front of those parties.
And my point on this for the chair is that you build that success on consistency, not once every 2 years because the chief's busy and we have to go. And I don't want to step on toes, with posting TransLink and stuff, but I don't think we can abdicate our own responsibility here about explaining what we are as an entity and an independent police service. And by taking existing information and getting it, I also don't want us sending something to Port Moody City Council and then Port Moody Police being upset. But there must be a way for us to be able to demonstrate we are partners in the success. We are here for public safety reasons. And I guarantee you take the Port Moody Council and 8 of them wouldn't know much about what we've just talked about today. And by sending this out on a quarterly basis, it would, I think, build for success, not to add more work. We've got this kind of stuff available. So that would just be my only comment.
Yeah.
In consideration 2025, we have some thought about a regular quarterly information piece going very specifically, including to the MLAs, not to, again, to step on TransLink's toes, but we've got a different message than TransLink.
Yeah.
And I think the nice opportunity, as Stephen mentioned, so the Mayor's Council on Regional Transportation, we get to highlight many of the initiatives that Transit Police is involved in. I think those opportunities, like the City of Surrey getting out, speaking with the councils, is so important, and that's something that we'll continue to prioritize. And I think the third point I'd just like to highlight, and the board actually brought forward this suggestion, the Canadian Association of Police Governance, opportunities like that in 2025 to present, to share the unique story of Transit Police. We've been in contact with the ED as well as the organizing committee, and we're looking forward to pursuing that opportunity in 2025.
Yeah, no, good point. I think it's about distribution, right? How do we do that effectively, given capacity as well? We create a lot of these reports, so can we repurpose them and, use the networks we have? So I think that's worth a further discussion. Yeah.
I agree. More public relations activity probably would be healthy to build the reputation of the police service. A comment or a question, I guess, that I have is that we're doing, a lot of great initiatives and doing them over, relatively short periods of time at different locations throughout the region. And it seems to me that it would be helpful to understand sort of what the long-term consequences of these short-term projects are in relation to reducing crime or reducing the propensity for crime to occur. So it's something that, from my perspective, probably could use a little study to establish, how often do we do these things and how often do we repeat them, and get a sense of the trends in relation to how many arrests, how many pour-outs, et cetera, occur as a result of repeated activity in enforcement. So I think that would probably be healthy. The only other comment I would make is we tend to spend a lot of time talking about operational financing or budget. But at times, maybe we don't spend enough time talking about how do we position ourselves so that people understand who we are outside of the environment of policing itself. And I think that's probably something that, one position dedicated to liaison broadly, I think would probably be a healthy thing for us to do, so that when, projects are happening, whether it's in the operations division or general investigations unit or wherever, that people are aware that we're out there doing things. And we can't do everything for everyone, but we're doing things in a way that we can demonstrate positive outcomes using the resources we have, because the resources are constrained, but if we use them effectively, there's actually good ways of approaching the business of policing so that the public experiences positive outcomes. And we can show it, in a statistically significant way. I think that's, from my perspective, would be healthy for us to consider. So appreciate the presentation and learning more about the things that we're doing. But adding on to that, saying I think it would be healthy for us to think about how often we do repeat these kinds of projects at the same locations to see whether what we're doing is actually having a positive effect over time.
Yeah, and fair comments. I think the ongoing analysis with our team as to, whether it's seasonal or whether it's like the project at Davie and Denman's a summer-based project, and looking at impact at those seasonal events, as well as the ongoing ones. So a good example is the one that Jeff talked about with the bus stops, and looking at repeat calls for service in those areas, and if we can keep coming back to those areas and have that trend stay consistent with having those usable by our transit passengers. And, we have our entire communications team here today, which actually doesn't happen all the time. So credit to the communications team. A lot of the work that Jeff's doing is looking at the project from the original proposal stage, and then looking at the delivery of that project and looking at funding sources. A lot of these projects that are being done, credit to Jeff and Julian and others in the team to look at creative funding sources that are outside of our budget that we can access to pay for these, and a very dedicated look from our communications team at the very beginning is, when we are successful in these projects, how are we going to share that with the public? And looking at timelines of when we can share it with charge approval in different stages, and making sure that we are sharing what we can with the project. Project Excursion, which I'll talk about in a bit, is another example that there is a very committed effort by our communications team to get the information out there when it's appropriate to share the work that we're doing. Also working with TransLink, like I know Stephen works a lot with TransLink, they're a little more risk adverse, where they don't want to show necessarily the policing that's happening on the system, weapons, drugs, violence potentially. So it's playing that back and forth with TransLink as to what we can do as far as sharing that, with showing that, yes, we're making it safer by these policing efforts. It's not inherently less safe because we have to police in those neighborhoods. So commitment by Stephen's team to cover those off. I agree with you, it's very important.
Well, my sense is that if we are able to show positive trends, that TransLink would see that as being positive news as well.
Agreed.
That's why sometimes when we report what we're doing, it sounds negative, but if we're reporting it on a continuum, it shows how the activities that we're undertaking actually are reducing the propensity for people to commit crimes on the transit system. So I think, from my perspective, that's why I'm raising the issue to say, how do we fit TransLink's agenda and our agenda, and provide the public with confidence that they're safe when they ride the system.
Correct, 100% agree with you. And Stephen's team tracks them, and we know crimes are dropping across the system. That's consistent with community as well, experience with other jurisdictions. But the perception of safety is the one that we still watch. So the perception of safety is still there, as per George's previous comment. And it's the perception of safety versus the reality that crime's dropping, and making sure that we're sharing those trends and reflecting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Response to that?
Yeah, I think just two final kind of pieces with that in terms of kind of reorg or org chart, looking at a couple things, increasing the position within public affairs, to your point, to very much continue to tell that story, kind of the work that we're engaged, as well as utilizing a data analyst who can really focus on looking and fire and sort of results out of projects, so we continue to be evidence-based as we approach them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we're talking about 22 or 23 communities, everybody has a council that oversees, you know, the governing of their communities. And if we had someone dedicated to going to every one of those 23 councils on a rotating basis, you could probably get everyone twice a year. And then, and share the same story, but on a, you know, sort of a chapter-by-chapter basis is the way I describe it. And then I think councils would feel more engaged with the transit police, understand who we are, and in fact, the message would then spread from those meetings through the reporters that attend those meetings, hear what's going on, but naturally spread through the media about us, without us having to make a lot of effort to do it. So my sense is it would be a good thing.
Adam, want to comment?
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, good presentation. Thanks, really appreciate it. I know that the police and jurisdictions really appreciate it as well, like those joint projects when we're all working together in the JFOs, and really good proactive work, so thank you for that. Just kind of following up on some of the stuff George said, and also Murray, you know, it made me think, like, you know, there's multiple audiences, right? So there's TransLink and the Mayor's Council, you know, city councilors, mayors, MLAs, MPs, all the rest of it, like you're saying, George. And then you kind of strike that balance sometimes between, like, they're all busy people, they're getting reams and reams and binders of information, and it's like one more report that, you know, nobody's going to read, quite frankly, because it's just, you know, you're reading about waste management, and you're reading about roads, and you're reading about your own police, and you're reading about what the transit police are doing, and it gets lost in the mayhem. But when I saw that presentation, I thought two things. One, it's prime to make a video. Like, I was thinking, you guys are the experts on that, but I was thinking, like, you could take a lot of that stuff and make a really cool video that could be used to tell the transit police story. But the other bullet point you're missing on the benefits of the projects at the bottom was, it's really good for morale and esprit de corps for your members. So the other piece of it is you can explain to the public all the good work you're doing, but also you could use it for sort of a recruiting thing as well, like saying, you know, we're not just the SkyTrain police, like, we do that, but there's a lot of other things we do that the public may not know about. And when we're all competing for, you know, scarce resources, getting that message out there, like, here's some of the interesting things you could do. Like, you may be able to morph it into multiple uses, depending on how you position it. And it's interesting, Randy, like, I agree with you, like, the point about TransLink, sometimes a little bit risk adverse. They don't want to make it seem like the SkyTrain or the transit system is dangerous. But the reason the transit system is safe is because you're doing all this great proactive work, and here's all the steps we're taking to keep people safe. So sometimes it's, you know, the way the media may position it as opposed to the reality of all the great work you're doing. So just a few things to kind of put between your cheek and gum, think about.
For comment.
You're absolutely right, Chief. Yeah, definitely, it is a great morale piece. It does bring this together, and it also engages our officers from different areas too. So the bus enforcement team, when our target enforcement team went out there, they engaged 2 patrol members. So teams that don't often work together get together and get that collaboration and teamwork. So it is a really good piece.
And I'll just say quickly, like, I was in an event last night for a group that does a lot of really good public safety work, and they put out, you know, different pieces of documentation that probably nobody reads. But at this event, they had a video that was slick. It was 3 minutes long. There's a lot of people at this event, and it just captured the whole audience. The video was really slick, and everybody will remember that video, and nobody's going to remember another report that's shoved in a binder or sitting on your iPad. So that's, I think, a good way to resonate with the public, and you can use it in so many different platforms now to get that message out.
Bill, did you have comments?
Yes, I have a question or comment. I think what I'm hearing is maybe once a year we need to maybe refresh the board on what our communication strategy is. I think that to level set what is happening and just to refresh us. But on your particular presentation, Jeff, I thank you, I appreciate that. And it'll be, I presume all these projects were over a period of a year. I saw some of them that were date specific, but I wasn't sure whether it happened during the 9 months or 10 months, or whether they were specific. So maybe in the future, when you provide that, give us what the timeframe is. But along, similar to the question with, that Murray had, is that some of the projects that you mentioned, there's a common metric that you use, the violations, how many tickets you get, and all that stuff. But after the project is done, do you do a post-review? And I guess the other question is that, are there other metrics that you use to determine whether that particular project is successful or not? I only heard one common theme, which is the violations, and how many arrests or how many alcohol, or whatever, but are there other metrics that you use to determine whether you're successful in that particular project?
Generally, the reporting is on the arrests that are made and those that we do track. So the violations, the fair infraction notices, liquor offenses, or loss violation tickets. So generally speaking, yeah, those are the metrics that we use to track results after a project.
Yeah, and just along the line, it might be helpful. So let's say you've done this project for a particular weekend or 2 weekends, and I'm looking at, for example, your project venture that you used. Did it get the result you wanted? Were there people no longer loitering around your bus stops and stations, or 2 weeks later they all came back? Then you know whether you were really achieved your project or your objective, and I think you kind of outline multiple objectives, and again, sort of the baseline and the trend.
And I would kind of break it down into two things.
Yeah.
One is the tangible, so one is the fair violations, one is the arrests, one is the breach charges, and then the other one is our performance indicators, so partnering with our police agencies, working with our TransLink partners, perception of safety, monitoring crime trends. Specific to Project Venture, this is an interesting one to watch because we had, Jeff and his team and one of our staff sergeants and sergeants propose this idea, but then it's the ongoing commitment from those officers. Visibility came up, and I think Chief Palmer brought it up at the last board meeting, efforts to increase visibility. But those officers who actually did that project are now taking ownership of those bus stops, and they found that trend, and now they're continuing to go and visit those bus stops and keep that work consistently going because they've found an avenue into a beneficial policing. So we're trying to get back to grassroots policing and visibility, and it's a bit of an aha moment. They proposed this project, they do very well, and now they're taking ownership for that community and come back. So there's the immediate tangibles, but then there's also the long-term benefit to these projects. Improving relationships with Surrey Police Service, RCMP, Richmond, Vancouver, whoever that may be, and then building those partnerships as well with them in the community. So lots of immediate benefit, but long-term as well.
Yeah, because if one of your objectives is to gain awareness to various audiences, then that should be an objective. If your objective is about the presence of, I'm looking at specifically Project Venture, then you can actually look at, I totally appreciate the fact that a lot of these projects are independent and also related to things that are outside of your domain, so to speak, i.e. if there's a significant health issue or something with social health, it will have a significant impact on your government.
Stephen?
So just, I think to draw your point, Bill, when you look at the strategic plan, our key performance indicators, like the strongest ones for the whole organization, is the rate of crimes against person, the rate of crimes against property, and then feelings of safety. And Randy referred to this earlier, like very often, the reality of how safe the system is, and it's becoming increasingly safe given declining crime rates, isn't necessarily mean that people are feeling more safe. Because similarly, what we're seeing across all of Canada is that people are feeling increasingly unsafe despite this falling crime rate. So really, when we look at it from a strategic level, For the board, you're looking at the overall system-wide feelings of safety and the overall system-wide reported crime rates. But from our perspective tactically, we're then kind of delving further into the data to determine, okay, where are people feeling more unsafe? And TransLink, they do a quarterly survey of transit riders, and although they will release, they release a very detailed report, what we provide to the board is overall how safe people feel across the system. But we kind of delve further into it to say, okay, how safe do people feel at Surrey Central? How safe do people feel at Commercial Broadway? So we're kind of delving into the data a little bit further at an operational level to find out, okay, where are those key areas where we really need to do those targeted projects, to see whether or not those projects will lead over time to people feeling more safe and also the continued decrease in crime rates. So that's kind of how the strat plan kind of cascades further down to the operational level. But from a feelings of safety perspective, we liaise very, very closely with TransLink in terms of when we're doing these projects at certain stations like Commercial Broadway. We're then looking, okay, is that impacting the feelings of safety at Commercial Broadway after we've done that project with a period of 3 weeks, after we've done that project over a period of several months. We don't necessarily always see an immediate benefit, but if we continue to implement those projects at the location over time, either we start to see that net benefit or we have to reevaluate and come up with some different strategy.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Jen.
I do have a comment. Thank you for great conversation. Thank you for the presentation. So I've got a couple of comments. We can always use statistics, but it's the context behind it. So I'd like, intelligence-led policing. We did have an issue with our integrated teams. We have 5 integrated teams, and our population where we police is about 2 million in RCMP, so we weren't telling our story well enough. And so, we had our detachment commanders going into the mayor, mayors and council and talking about it. But what we did from an integrated, from our I teams, we went in and did a presentation, because a video is worth 1,000 words a second. And they didn't realize, what the RCMP does from an integrated team perspective. Although we oversee the integrated teams, there's many different police agencies in those integrated teams. So we had to give visibility because it's a high dollar program into the millions. But they really didn't understand what we were, what our dogs did, what our IHIT did, what the trends they were seeing. So we went in and we went to each and every mayor and council in the Lower Mainland, and we do it probably at least once a year, but we started doing it 2 times a year, and it was just a really nice video, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we took questions, and we talked about the financial impact, we talked about the operational impact for public safety, and how when we work together with our partners, also our cities, and with the other police agencies that either provide funding or resources into the integrated teams, that makes us better because we're all in the same vein of, enhancing public safety. And we got an awful lot of buy-in because a lot of mayors and councils did not truly understand the funding formula, or they didn't understand how complex it was, because when we work together, we're better. And I think it's really, really important. Metrics are one thing, but context is another. So you got to get out in front of it because, our call volume is going up, but we need additional funding, whether it's from the province or it's from our municipalities to support those integrated teams. And it's all about, I do like the idea with regards to telling the story and the morale. But the nice thing is that when you're giving people opportunities, they get to develop their skill sets. So, and they can take on greater roles in the organization once they have, that small little acorn starts to be a big tree, and you get more skill sets, and that really bodes well for all organizations. And that's also a way for retention as well. Because if you're not promoting and developing your teams, you may lose them. And so I appreciate all the comments here, and I'll just leave it at that.
And I think the important thing in that, that getting out in community, the importance of telling our story, that work is in progress. We have been working kind of on that branding strategy. Very fortunate we have joined our agency someone who has significant experience in cinematography, so looking at exploring sort of those opportunities, and I think there is a very unique ability through pictures and video to tell a very compelling, important story of transit police.
Sure, final comment.
In regards to the content of this presentation, did your control find any issue with open learning? I know the presentation talks about
Yeah, a few of them. Project Venture, definitely where we addressed the loiter in the bus shelters. We did encounter, I think that project had 4 incidents of possession of illegal substance. So, yeah, for sure, the bus stops, and with the changes in the legislation, the amount of possession that people are allowed to have, and kind of pulling back on being able to use in a public area that, you know, other people will be around and expect a safe area. So now we've started making those arrests again and dealing with those things. For sure, at the bus stops, we did encounter open drug use there, and we did address it and make arrests for that. Some of the other projects as well, Commercial Broadway, that was another area where drug arrests were made in that project. I think it's a significant problem, yes, because people have that open drug use at an area like a bus stop where, you know, you will have a wide range of people using that bus stop, from families, children, adults, but everybody. And so that area does need to be a safe use area where people can expect to go there and not be subjected to drug use.
I mean, is it significant? Like we mentioned before, interactions with the venture project. I was wondering how big typically is the problem that you're seeing? What is it?
Statistically speaking, for drug arrests, I would say is not a significant amount, but the project did run for 3 days. So during that time period, to run into 4 different incidents during the 3 days, I mean, it's fairly prevalent. It is happening, so it is good that we were out there to address it. Yeah. But for drug arrests for minor possession amounts, not significant in the grand scheme.
One of the challenges, the prevalence of open drug use negatively impacts that perception of safety on the system. So the chief and I actually just attended a meeting where Translink had done an analysis of frequent transit users, infrequent transit users, and people who don't use transit. And the perception of safety was significantly higher amongst those who use transit than the other categories. The least secure feeling for those who never use transit, because they haven't experienced the visibility, the force multiplier of everybody out there getting from their destination A to B without being challenged. The one that we find to be extremely significant as far as, you know, tangible numbers as far as how often that's happening, but the perception of safety is severely impacted by an individual who's causing that disruption or disorder at a station, and then having people walk by and feel insecure or unsafe. That would probably be the biggest impact on our ridership, is that perception of safety.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it, your presentation. All right, next item up is the Chief Information Report.
Yeah, thank you very much, and just want to recognize Jeff Connor in the acting inspector role, and just your leadership stepping into that in a really informative presentation today, so thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Deputy Randy Fincham, who will be giving operations update, and in turn it'll go over to acting Deputy Troy Hendricks, who will do the administrative division update.
Thanks, Chief. I can appreciate that the board does have a copy of information, so for the public audience, I'll just go through and summarize a few of the key events. So recently, we had additional deployments for Grey Cup, so this was through November 11th to 17th. We had additional police officers downtown at the convention center area, waterfront, stadium station, providing an enhanced police presence, working with our partners with the Vancouver Police Department. And a lot of this work is us building up to future events. So we have Taylor Swift coming up pretty quick here, so working with Vancouver on a deployment model that's going to meet both agencies' needs and the public safety need. And then FIFA in 2026. So a lot of this is building up to those events. It was a great opportunity. Thanks to the team here, actually, November 9th was Take Your Kids to Work Day. So we had a lot of youth come in. They were exposed to our explosive detection dog team, our communication center, as well as our simulator and traveling on the transit system with our officers. So great day there and great work by the teams. Patrol training. So we have a mix, or our CISM team, our peer support team, has expanded. Currently, we have representatives from our operations communication center, our community safety officer program, our regular sworn members, as well as our civilian professionals. So we recently had a training day with all those groups together, so it was nice to see representation from across the organization to support the wellness of our officers. A couple of the projects Jeff has already talked about, so I'll just skip over those. One of the projects that we looked after in our investigation section was Project Excursion. So this was a 6-month project into ongoing drug dealing at Surrey Central SkyTrain Station. There was significant national media coverage on this one. This was 2 individuals that were selling high volumes of opioids in the form of dog treats to disguise those. So that created quite the significant amount of media attention due to that unique nature of those drugs. So following that event, charges were laid, 10 counts of trafficking and a controlled substance, 4 counts of a possession of a controlled substance, as well as firearms offenses. So that one is one we'll continue to monitor at Surrey Central and measure impact on that community. And it was nice to take those 2 individuals out of the equation. Our investigation section, so our crime analysts continue to do phenomenal work. So 15 separate identifications of persons of interest in criminal offenses through that section, as well as our video analysts, large volumes of work coming out of there processing video for 51 different transit police investigations that were forwarded to Crown Council. So lots of work coming out of that team. Looking forward to expanding down the road due to volume. Working with our partners with Coast Mountain Bus Company and TransLink as well with that video processing. Those relationships have been phenomenal in being able to deliver that. Our community engagement team's busy again, so visit to the Ismaili Centre in Vancouver, work at York House Private School, the Chinatown CPC, as well as raising the survivors flag here at this building, which I know we had representation at, representation of the BC Law Enforcement Memorial, as well as the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So those teams are continuing to be out there and doing great work. As you're aware, we're currently transitioning from Kirk to Shiraz with their Indigenous Liaison Officer program. Lots of work going on there with training with the RCMP and our partner organizations. And our Blue Eagle Cadet program resumed again in September, and 8 cadet sessions between Surrey and Vancouver dealing with at-risk youth and engaging with them on a regular basis, which is fantastic. Our mental health liaison officer, we've talked about this before, so we're expanding our mental health liaison officer. We posted for 2nd positions. We have another officer out there to engage in community and support our officers, as well as working with our partners within TransLink and Coast Mountain Bus Company, and then our community partners trying to expand that program and work with our hospitals and others to assist in community. Waterfront Community Policing Center, 455 volunteer hours in October, which is significant, over 100 volunteers in Vancouver. The program's so successful, we're looking at expanding that out east through Metrotown and out into Surrey, and as that program continues to grow, so that's great to see. Our canine program, so we welcomed our new dog Banjo, going through testing right now and just actually was recently validated. We've had our canine units collaborating with our RCMP explosive disposal units for familiarization on our system. So when they are called in, if we have an event, just making sure that everybody's working together and everybody's familiar with the system. And interesting note with our canine handlers, so we had 2 canine handlers travel to the Canadian Police Canine Association Championships in Calgary. Our 2 officers placed in the top 3, and it was interesting on this one. Great to see that all three top performers that were all women dog handlers from across the country. So exceptional representation by officers who took 2nd and 3rd place, and then the person who took 1st place was also a female dog handler. Our CSOs, so great to report that we're at our full complement of 24. So they've got a significant impact on the system with visibility, presence, working with our partners, violation tickets. Unfortunately, chief closures, but that program's being very proven that other agencies are learning about the experience and the abilities of our officers, and we run the risk of losing some of those officers to other agencies if we can't take them first. So we're working to welcome them into our regular sworn members first if we have that opportunity. And Jeff mentioned TMET. So our targeted mobile enforcement team still out there. We've spoken about the bus lane project in the past, one of the few projects in policing that we actually get significant kudos from the public for actually working in those bus lanes and improving the flow of traffic. And as we work with our partners in TransLink to expand bus rapid transit, lots of meetings between Transit Police, TransLink, Coast Mountain Bus Company on how that expansion of those bus routes is going to take place and how we can be there to support that flow as we look at routes and make sure that we're there to support that flow of traffic. Chief?
Yeah, and we'll turn it over to Acting Deputy for the update for administrative services.
Do you want to take questions on this report before we go to the next report, or do you want to do both?
Whatever the
Sure, yeah.
board prefers,
Let's
yeah.
do questions
Yeah.
now.
The question that came to mind was, Kurt, I believe, is First Nations, and Shiraz isn't. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so I guess the question I have is there any pushback around the fact that the Indigenous Relations Officer now, liaison officer, isn't First Nations when it comes to dealing with First Nations?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had many conversations with Shiraz, and this was a concern that Shiraz raised when he brought forward his name for this position. Shiraz comes from a very visible minority background. Shiraz is fantastic at engaging with community regardless of that demographic, whatever that community is. So Shiraz is actually very uniquely positioned to engage with that community, build those relationships, and reach out. Shiraz is actually partnered with John Gravengard in Vancouver, who is a non-Indigenous person working in Musqueam First Nation. And we've had the opportunity to have Shiraz reach out to other agencies and work with those officers who aren't, and look at ways that they've been able to build those relationships. Shiraz, we've talked about it, and Shiraz recognizes that this is a long journey for Shiraz to build that trust with those relationships, and it's going to take some time, but he's very well suited to do that. And I'm confident that going forward he will be able to do that. Kirk's been great working with Shiraz to introduce him to various leadership groups and community as well. Kirk won't be leaving our agency until spring of next year. We've got other thoughts and ideas to keep him involved in the Blue Eagles program for that transition, but it's more of a challenge for sure. I can appreciate that. Community groups have that journey to trust might be quicker for somebody from the own community, and we think that Shiraz is going to do a fantastic job given the opportunity and time.
Well, the reason I raise it is that the general perception is that First Nations, Indigenous peoples aren't getting enough airtime, and that one way to demonstrate that their interests are being looked after is to make sure that the positions that are in place to assist in building those relationships are people that understand the context, at least broadly, maybe not specifically for every band or tribe. But so that's why I'm raising it. I was kind of surprised when I heard that Shiraz was taking over, because I thought, well, gee, that's kind of moving in an unusual direction compared to what is typical in relation to just making sure that we have a representation from all the different minorities that we police or we are overseeing. So I look forward to future comments in that regard as well, because I agree with you that it looks like it would be challenging, but I also agree with you that Shiraz, by virtue of his background, understands the context of how minorities sometimes feel within the context of a democracy. So.
Yeah, and the challenge is going to be, and I'll turn it back over to the chief, but it's a mix of that culture, that passion, and that ability. So Shiraz, without a doubt, has that, passion, ability, and he has a different culture, which...
Thank you.
So just two brief comments. So looking to have greater representation of Indigenous people in our recruitment is definitely, an organizational priority. And secondly, just that lived experience. So TransLink Indigenous Relations, we're reaching into them as well to work closely and be able to leverage some of their, from their section, their programs, as well as personnel to support and assist in our programs.
Well, the only other comment, we went from having, I guess, two Indigenous people represented within the force, or within the service, to, and I don't know directly in relation to liaison positions, but right now, I don't think we have any, is that right? We may have people that are Indigenous in the context of sworn members or civilian staff, but in relation to the people actually engaging with First Nations people, we're kind of moving away from a position where we have actual, First Nations people dealing with First Nations people. So, but I'm only raising it more in the context of an observation than looking for any feedback, more in that context.
Go ahead, Christina.
Thank you so much for raising this. This is the first time hearing that, and I'm very concerned that this position is, a non-Indigenous person. And I was actually completely with the comment that, of course, the other people might whatever background is, because they're somehow have additional skills or knowledge or experience with Indigenous people. The Indigenous legal position and the position that Indigenous people play in the criminal justice system is unique to them. We are overrepresented in the Canadian justice system, we're overrepresented in the child protection system, and merely putting in another fiscal minority after the illegal is completely insufficient, is a step backwards, and I echo Member Dunwoodie's concern that we have lost or are about to lose two fiscal minority officers who have this position, having lost Cheryl Dick last year in the and now we can I think this is a complete and I'm concerned that it was not brought forward in a more open and transparent light in the report, and I'm concerned about the direction that we're going.
And I apologize, I don't mean my comments with disrespect. What I mean is that when Shiraz shared interest in competing for that position, that Shiraz brings a unique skill set where he's had challenges in his own life. And what I've asked Shiraz to do is appeal to those two specific to his way and how he can reach out to other communities and learn about the Indigenous community and how he can build trust and relationships with that community. So I'm not comparing his experience to anybody else. I'm just asking Shiraz to look at his strength, what he's done, and if there's a possibility that he can look at some of that to build relationships with any other group like he's done throughout the agency. I don't mean it with any disrespect. I don't mean to compare it to anything, just that his skill set and ability is unique, and he has a lot of relationships to build. I'm not challenging any other. I completely agree with every other comment you've made.
And I think this is such an important conversation. And I think this is the difficulty, and we've outlined another police agency as well who, has an individual in the role who is not Indigenous. So, Christine, your comments, the underrepresentation on so many levels, as you've indicated, justice system overrepresented, underrepresented in policing, and we keep looking at how do we continue to recruit and have what would be best practice and opportunity, an Indigenous person in that role. Unfortunately, organizationally, we didn't have that sort of opportunity. We're losing an individual to retirement, but our goal is to continue to try to have that Indigenous voice and representation in our organization, and certainly in integral and important roles like that.
Efforts are we specifically using to recruit an Indigenous representation, and what concerns does the organization have that our Indigenous liaison efforts are going to be stalled or not move forward in an expedited fashion as this person comes up to speak, what this person wants to learn?
So what we've done.
They don't have a qualification like this one.
Yeah. So as the board is aware, the Blue Eagle program has been a long-standing program, And our incumbent in the Indigenous liaison role has been in that position for a long period of time, kind of supporting, mentoring. Purposely knowing the importance of this role, we've purposely created over a 6-month overlap and going into community, ensuring introductions are happening within the various nations, kind of in different committees and roles. So it's something we've been attuned to, have brought previously to the board around Shiraz coming into this kind of role and position. And, you know, we are reflective of the very points you brought forward. Continue to look, as indicated, what other opportunities are there to, you know, partner, again, with TransLink Indigenous Relations. But we currently do not have an Indigenous, you know, person to step into that particular role. So, yeah, please.
I was just going to say, we had tried to get TransLink Indigenous Relations to this meeting to present on their activities. They weren't available. They had conflict. We're going to look to bring them into the first meeting next year, but I think it's a good conversation to have with them, like, are we doing everything we possibly can for recruitment to recruit Indigenous members to this organization? What is TransLink doing? How can we capitalize on that? And that's a question I'll pose to Alana in preparation for that meeting, so she can bring forward some ideas.
And the last piece on that is, just to maybe finish the question posed, is, you know, looking at, are there opportunities for a cadet program, like Indigenous cadet program or other opportunities where we're bringing Indigenous youth into the organization and kind of having that experience here in the hope to increase those numbers.
I appreciate the efforts that's being made to engage with TransLink, Indigenous Engagement Committee.
They have an Indigenous Relations team.
Indigenous Relations team. And I'll just repeat the comments I made about the Indigenous Engagement team with our governance meeting. You know, I appreciate the efforts that the TransLink Indigenous Engagement team is making. That's great. I would like to hear more. That's great that we would engage with them. But TransLink, I firmly believe have different issues in terms of Indigenous communities than TransLink does. TransLink is going to look at issues in regards to service delivery, issues in regards to roads, but policing is completely different. And Darren would say that there's this position not being a lead person. I think it's a step backwards from our reconciliation exercise.
I have a question in trying to find a solution to what we're talking about now. And things that I've heard about in the last year or so. Does this role need a sworn police officer in the role? You've got a limited number of sworn police. This goes to what Murray's often talked about, is we've got a limited number of people and civilianization within the police agency. For this particular role, is it not possible to reconsider, be like having a Black community liaison officer and putting someone in that role who wasn't Black? And, you know, you might not have a individual within the police agency that's qualified. But there's lots of people that we could probably attract to the role on a full-time basis with a very clear mandate that isn't just for a 2-year term as they move on to something else. This would be their career. Maybe we'd attract someone on secondment from TransLink, but it would be our agency's person. But to have as again, paraphrasing Murray, a gun-toting police officer doing a job like this, does that make practical sense?
So, thank you. And that is a conversation we've had as a team as well. Is there that possibility? Should we, you know, consider potentially civilianization of that position for the exact comments you talked about, the longevity, the continuity? You know, from previously being and having oversight Indigenous Relations section and hearing from community, I do believe that there is value in community engaging with a police officer. in uniform and sort of breaking down some of those barriers that exist. So I think there's opportunity in both, but I do think that representation of a sworn officer and engagement in community is an important one. And I say that from my experience, but I also say that truly again from hearing, and I know there's varied voices in community, but many I've heard from and their position on that.
And to your point, George, we're currently working with Kirk, so recognizing that is a gap within our agency. So we are working with Kirk to retain Kirk, whether that is a sworn member part-time capacity or a contract capacity as a non-sworn member, is currently in discussions with Kirk to retain him on staff, and we can transition the role to the appropriate person. And a lot of that work is with Blue Eagles as well. We've had the conversation with Blue Eagles, with the youth who we deal with. We think that they will, Kirk's own experience, Kirk's background, is a better relation to those young youth, and working to have that relationship. And we think that we will be able to retain Kirk in some capacity, but that's not going to be a long-term plan for Kirk. So until we can do that, we're going to.
And just one last follow-up question. Within the 24 CSOs that we have, are any Indigenous?
Demographically, I don't believe there are, no.
Which goes to your issue before there. If that's our farm team, then we need some wingers, some centers and stuff that can actually play the position. And I know it's tough to find, it's not impossible. And we need to grow from within, we need to provide opportunities for individuals. Even if this was a CSO position, that it's a start. It just, as we talk about it, it does seem like we need to address, and I know you are, but I think we as a board need to kind of come together and say, how do we find a solution to this in concert with you, senior leadership team?
Fair enough.
Yeah, just on this, what you're bringing up here around it's come up with Kurt before, around the role of the Indigenous liaison officer, like what is the role, and this kind of need for this very expansive, position, and whether or not it makes sense to have one officer or how this needs to be reconfigured. I noticed in the report that I was wondering who had done this, but, whether it was Kurt, was presenting at the JI and teaching on the cultural safety course. So they're educators. So in terms of having an officer liaison, that might be one component or one position, but this is much broader in terms of what we're talking about. So it seems to me maybe a rethink or restructuring of how this or more than one position exists within the agency. Just sort of lay it, and it's been raised before around laying so much, especially as an Indigenous person to be in a role as an officer, to be responsible for, training, cultural safety, liaising with Nation groups. It doesn't seem possible, right? So I think it's raising some really good questions. I think it's an opportunity. Perhaps it comes back to people in culture as a committee to discuss structurally how this might work.
Okay. Let's make sure we'll put this on next board meeting agenda to further discuss, get the TransLink Indigenous team to say what they do, so we get bigger context of what we can do, right?
I do think, though, that, we went from basically two people being in the role of Indigenous liaison officers, Cheryl and Kurt. And now I don't think there are any Indigenous people in the liaison roles. And so I think we've taken kind of two steps back. When Cheryl got seconded to TransLink, I always assumed that she would be coming back to be, the second Indigenous liaison officer with the transit police. And then now Kurt's retiring and Therese is taking over. And so, I am concerned that the optics aren't good. Maybe the operationalization of how that role is undertaken may be something that we're managing, but I'm not sure that the optics really send the right message to the community about our interest in being involved in reconciliation in an active way.
Okay. And maybe just clarification on that point, Sergeant Cheryl Dix was the sergeant of her community engagement team. She was not an Indigenous relations officer, retired, and so we've only had that one officer, but what we're hearing is a clear discussion around what are those additional kind of opportunities, and we look forward to further dialogue, and thank you for bringing such an important discussion forward.
Yeah, we'll make note, put that on the agenda for next meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'll just speak my thoughts. So there's no question the sensitivity of the subject matter, and it's quite clear that that's a broader, what I call strategic discussion on the board level on where we go on this. But this is in no disrespect for Shiraz and what you're trying to do. I think it is a sort of what I call a temporary measure until you reach the goal where you want it to reach, which is an Indigenous officer. I think just, and after you, Director Madden, today I'm not convinced, but you can try to convince me, I'm not convinced us that in the future that we go straight to a CSO lead Indigenous, and that's the optics looks like it can water down, but that's a discussion that.
Yeah, part of the broader discussion. Yeah, and no disrespect to Shiraz. He's been involved in the program for a long time. We know that he's put tons of his time into it, so, yeah, okay.
I'll just make one final comment. In terms of a more fulsome discussion, hopefully we have that at the next meeting. I would like to hear what our recruitment strategy is for more Indigenous officers, although I appreciate the Blue Eagle program, the Big program. Those are the children, right? And if that is our recruitment strategy for officers, we are 20 years away from those children becoming officers. So I would like to know what we're doing now to recruit adults officers and give you that.
Sure, that can be part of the discussion. Yep, no problem. Okay, Troy.
Morning. I appreciate the opportunity to stand in for Deputy Graham this morning, so I'll lead an overview of the Administrative Services Division. So specifically with the facility, I mentioned of a new opportunity for us at Brentwood SkyTrain Station, so as part of the overall redevelopment and renovation of the station, we've got a new space in the station, and it's quite unique in the sense that the office is right in the mezzanine level, so it's very, very public. So it'll be very, very exposed to the passengers that's entering and exiting the station. So another piece that we're looking at, and we're working with Stephen's team, and we're working with development as well, from a new perspective. It's kind of a floor-to-ceiling glass type of an office building. So there's lots of opportunities to utilize that space for planning. So looking forward to being one of our kind of first projects from a branding perspective. On the recruiting side of things, of course, we're Chief Palmer comments there about how we're always looking for different, we're all fighting for the same resources. So the team is working constantly to fill our slots. Right now, we're working to fill 4 seats for the upcoming January spot. I'm happy to say that we're well positioned to fill those seats for January, so that's a great thing. We just had the recruit class 173 graduate here in November, so we've got 4 of our recently graduated officers are now in the operations division, and that's really good. From a training perspective, we've been working over the last number of months with the Alzheimer's Society of BC to provide additional in-service training to our officers on all issues and matters related to dementia. It's something that our officers come across on the system quite frequently. Often it comes in as a call for somebody who's confused and seems to be riding around the system on a regular basis. And one of our staff, typically a bus operator or SkyTrain attendant, calls us in and is concerned about the person's well-being. And they can be particularly challenging for our officers to deal with because depending on the state of the individual, it can be sometimes very difficult to get enough information from that person to support them and get them back to a safe place. So I'm happy to say that we're going to be rolling out the in-service training in January of 2025, and in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Society of BC, that will coincide with Alzheimer's Awareness Month. So that's the training we're going to occur. From the information management section, myself and several of our other subject matter experts have been asked to participate in the Municipal Police Disclosure Committee, which of itself is a subcommittee of the Police Crown Liaison Committee. I think we're well positioned to represent on that committee because as kind of a regional police service, we are exposed to multiple ground officers across the entire region. So we don't have just one lens, where if you're the Westminster Police, for example, you deal with one ground officer in Westminster. If you're the Portland RCMP, you deal with one ground office in your area. We interact with all of the ground officers across both regions within our service delivery area. So again, we're well positioned to bring some of the issues forward that we're seeing, and there's some nuances between ground officers, as you can imagine. So I'm looking forward to providing input as we look to deal with the disclosure moving forward. It's something that impacts and affects all police agencies across the region. From a human resources, people and culture perspective, we will be leading respectful workplace training. We just had respectful workplace training. We brought, we brought in...
Dave Sullivan.
I just lost the name of the organization that we brought in to do it. It was just last week. So we've got, sorry, I completely lost the name of the organization, but we're bringing in this group to lead respectful workplace training with all of our NCOs. So that happened over last week. And we've also got being set up for the same presentation in December here with our senior leadership team. So it's important that respectful workplace is important for all levels of leadership in our organization. So that's one thing we convey to our sergeants and our staff sergeants is that they're getting this training, but also the entire senior leadership team is getting training. So we're all going to be operating on the same page with respect to workplace issues. Dale Carney.
There you go.
On the the IT technology perspective, so during October, November, all of our employees participated in a cyber awareness and security training, and that was in collaboration with TransLink, so they were the ones that were driving this, and of course, as with all the rest of the enterprise, this training was pushed out to all employees. We're all aware that there's been a number of cyber attacks worldwide in various big organizations. So it is a particular concern for TransLink. It is a particular concern for the TransLink. So we want to make sure that all of our folks are well educated so that they're not yourself on.
I failed.
Took the training?
No, in the phishing message that was sent out.
So that's it for the administrative division. Taking questions.
Questions for Troy? Report? Okay. All right. Sure, like, do you want just to understand what is covered in the training? Yeah, we can get that information, sure. Okay. All right, all good? Any other questions?
I would just like to make a comment that I really appreciate the way that this report is laid out, because I know it's been a little while now, but in terms of identifying the strategic pillars and then the way it's laid out, I find it very easy. Thank you to those who have crafted it, and I appreciate it.
Several iterations, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, all good. Let's move to report from the Finance Committee. Bill.
Great, thank you. I'll try to keep it short, and there's 3 items that is probably informative for the group here. We met back in November the 6th. First item, just wanted to provide you with a risk update, 2 items on the risk update. One is on funding. As you know, a couple weeks ago, TransLink announced a shortage on funding, so that's something that we'll find out in months to come. One is security and confidential information. Another area, they did some work on that and confirmed they meet the cybersecurity standards in good alignment with the TransLink replacement movement due to some vulnerabilities. The records management system, no updates on that. No further updates on that, that's fine. Just quickly on the financial statements, for the first, 3 quarters ending September 30th, we're running at a positive variance of about $1.6 million. That's really, the key factor in that is really the vacancies on what is authorized and what they actually implemented. There's currently, close to a 4% vacancy rate on sworn officers, and looking at that one now, knowing that's the important metric to use. And because of the vacancy and the time of the vacancy, the flip side to that is that created over budget on the overtime to ensure that transit fleet meets their service delivery model. But overall, it's a favorable variance. The forecast for the end of the year is forecast to have a positive variance of about $640,000. Again, that's because of the timing and the vacancy of the sworn officers. The only item I would talk about as far as the expenses, the only item that is significantly higher than the budget is the area where there were some fees on cybersecurity review, and that had an impact on the budgeted expenses. The other ones are pretty minor in comparison. The Finance Committee continued to spend some significant time on just looking at the complement on the salaries and compensation. That represents 91% of the budget. So we continue to monitor the overtime and the timing of the officers coming in. The third item I just want to talk about is the provisional budget for 2025. Thank you for Director Dinwiddie and Chief Mayor, who did the TransLink budget workshop, which presents to them the 2025 request, which showed our priorities for 2024, the budget envelope, and what our FTE roadmap is an increase, and which is the projected headcount for the next couple of years. Close with that, and I just want to add on the 2025 financial budget that was shared with the group back in that July 31st meeting. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Bill? All right, over to George for Governance and Community Engagement Committee.
It will be very brief. The material is posted with the minutes. 4 quick items. Our own board evaluation, as we're in kind of a public session here, just to remind everybody that the board itself does its evaluation effectiveness, and that will be coming out soon. That will be probably next month or so. We continue to look for best practices in governance, and I encourage those that aren't on our committee, any ideas that you come up with, things that happen in other organizations that you're part of that you think would apply to us. We'd love to hear that and bring it into the mix. Our community engagement through Stephen, I know he's identified June next year as a meeting which we as a board will be in the community, so we'll work together as, again, as a full board. I'm trying to make this useful for everybody to tie into the community, people that we serve here as board members. And our desire is also to create in 2025 a more workable relationship and information flow with our friends at TransLink, maybe set something up in a more casual way with the TransLink board, just to be able to create a discussion point. And that hopefully will be useful for both sides, as we kind of talked about earlier in terms of the communication, making sure everybody understands who's doing what, and how effective a lot of this stuff is, because I know we've very quickly, but a lot is undertaken, a lot of good stuff happens.
Great. All right, thanks. Any questions for George?
Just to comment on the liaison with the TransLink board, I spoke about that with Lorraine Cunningham, who's the chair of the TransLink board, and she's interested in setting up a board meeting sometime between now and the end of the year. So Jennifer Breeze, who's the chair of the TSML board, will be working with Lorraine and with Arnie and Chief Mayor to find a suitable date for us to meet.
Correct. Yeah, I have talked to Jennifer about that, so.
And the other thing that I've talked to Jennifer about is, I know it's been raised from time to time on this board, our lack of knowledge about who's on the TSML board. And so it's something that I was going to talk with you about, Marnie, just setting up a time, possibly at the first meeting in the new year of our board, to have Jennifer and the directors from the TSML board to be at this board meeting to just introduce themselves and talk a little bit more about TSML's responsibilities relative to the transit police. Because that would be helpful just to better understand our governance model.
Okay, yeah, I'll mention that to Jennifer. All right, any other questions for George? Good, all right, so that brings us to the end of the agenda. Next meeting is February 7th, 2025, closed at 9:30. Thanks, everyone. All right.